saying, every house has a roofing leak, and therefore when yours leak, it's your job to stay in there. She's telling her sister, look at me. I've been married to your grandfather for thousands of years. Of course, she exaggerates. And I'm still here. I expect the same of you. A husband is never asked, where have you been? Because if you do, you actually risk the marriage. It's your job to make sure that this marriage works. That's Aisha in Botswana. Aisha is 15 years, a Swazi young lady who, again, like the Aisha in Botswana, loves her grandmother. And they're watching television. And she sees on television 18-year-olds, she's only 15. She says, 18-year-olds driving around in BMWs. And her grandmother says, if you just be good, if you can just dance greatly at the Reed Dance in August, maybe the king will choose you. The king of Swaziland has got 13 wives. And the grandmother, who loves her granddaughter, would love for this 15-year-old to be perhaps the 14th wife, maybe the 15th wife, so she can drive around in a BMW and live in a palace. And of course, Aisha's grandmother loves Aisha, and therefore, obviously, she wants great things for her. So she wants her to be a 15th wife. Because if she's 15, maybe by that time, maybe one more would have been taken, maybe 17th wife, we don't know. We have another Aisha, this one in India. Her grandmother is whispering to her, if only you're good, if only you just, change this boisterous self of yours, if only you would not run around like a little boy, perhaps we can find a husband for you. You know how hard it is. Sometimes I wonder why my son didn't have a son. As a girl, it's so difficult. Aisha knows that her grandmother loves her, and she wants the best for her, and she really does want her to get married. But Aisha's grandmother is worried that maybe she gets married, maybe she behaves like the cousin that they know who ended up being burnt in the kitchen. Mysteriously, her clothes burst into flames. She doesn't want her granddaughter's, clothes to burst into flame and for her to die. And therefore, she wants her to be good. She wants her to be a good wife. And she's trying to create this good wife. And she's really worried that she's not going to succeed in creating this good wife. We have another Aisha. This one in Sierra Leone. Her grandmother is whispering to her, of secret societies of women, where they're powerful, where they're in charge. And she wants to be part of that. She wants to be part of that. She wants to be part of these rituals that make little girls grow into women. And she hopes it will happen to her. And her grandmother, of course, wants that for her. They love each other. They want the best for each other. We have another Aisha, this one in Uganda. She's just been raped. She's 16 years old and she's just been raped. And everybody is crying. And there's a ritual, a cleansing ceremony that's enacted to make her whole. She's been spoiled to make her whole. Everybody's so upset this happened to her because now they don't know what they're going to do with her because she needs to get married one day and she cannot be married if she's not whole. And of course, the grandmother is worried that she's failed in her duty to make sure to preserve this young girl and make sure that she is whole enough for marriage. We have another Aisha anywhere in the world, Pakistan, Afghanistan. Again, this Aisha is with her grandmother, and she can see her grandmother in this great dress, looking through the world through this window, and she wants to be like her. She wants, she's still young, but she hopes that she'll be, very soon be old enough to wear this great garment, this blue garment, so that she can look through the world, because she wants to be like her grandmother, because she loves her. And of course, your grandmother is your role model. Women in your life are your role models, and therefore she wants to be like her. And her grandmother, too, is worried, that her behavior, she's trying to contain her, to make sure that she can keep her whole until she can deliver her to one day to the marital bed, which is the destiny of all young girls. These stories tell us that young girls in many developing countries, not all of them, not always, but young girls in many developing countries are taught a few lessons. That little girls must be protected and guarded, not for their own good, but so that they can be delivered whole and unspoiled to their husbands. They taught that wifehood and motherhood is not a choice. It is what little girls must expect to attain. It's not a choice. Little girls don't choose whether or not one day they'll be wives. They must be wives. Little girls do not choose whether one day they'll be mothers. They must be mothers. And if they are able to succeed on any of those 2 points, then they are failures. Little girls in many developing countries are told that wifehood and motherhood hurts. That it hurts physically, it hurts emotionally. The Aisha of Sierra Leone, for example, part of her growing up, part of being part of that secret society may well be the carving off of bits of herself in a ritual that's become to be called female genital cutting. It hurts, but that's a lot of women. Little girls, in Botswana included, are told that marriage is much more important than the two people, the primary people who make it up, and that in the event that the marriage is threatened, then it is the role of the woman to make sure that they save it, even if it kills them. And that is why that Aisha of Botswana was being told that not every roof leaks. Expect that. And it is your job to make sure you stay inside no matter how much you get soaked. Little girls are told in many developing countries that the family is much more important than the constituent members of the family. And therefore, when the family hurts, a choice has to be made. When that father, that stepfather, that brother, that uncle, or even a stranger hurts a member of the family, if dealing with the hurt damages the family or exposes the family, then there must be silence. Because when you just make a choice between the individual member of the family and the family is supreme. It is not because the family or the community loves that abuser any more than they love the child. It's because they love the family much more. And therefore, when a choice is made, the family will be protected and the individual will be sacrificed. Little girls in many developing countries are told that adulthood is marked by marriage. And therefore, the key to assuming relationships, adult relationship, is through marriage. And that may well actually explain the anger or the incomprehension around gay rights. Because imagine this, if you're sitting in Malawi, if you're sitting in Botswana, if you're sitting in Swaziland, where relationships are based on who you're married to. First of all, when adulthood is marked by marriage, because you have to first be married to be able to assume adult relationships, and therefore, once you get married, you have relationship with various members of your in-laws. Nobody can understand why someone would choose not to be an adult, and therefore not to choose not to be married, because only when you're married do these relationships get formed. And therefore, the idea that somebody may choose not to get married or choose a lifestyle that actually excludes marriage becomes like, then what are we going to do with you? You know, you actually are bowing out of your responsibilities as an adult. But I think what we must also remember is that none of those grandmothers hate their grandchildren. Actually, they love them. They want the best for them. They hurt them because they cannot imagine doing any other way. And imagine, let's talk about the Aisha from Swaziland. Part of being taken as a 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th wife is a very beautiful ceremony called the Reed Dance. Who at 15 does not want to be part of the Reed Dance? Who at 50 does not want to be part of this movement of young girls going out as a group, singing and dancing, beautiful, carrying reeds on their heads and just dancing? So to imagine not to be part of that is to imagine not being a Swati in the first place. If you think about the Aisha in Sierra Leone, for example, what Sierra Leonean child does not want to be part of this great ceremonial ritual of transforming from girlhood to adulthood? And therefore, how can they imagine being an adult without that? But part of that ceremony, part of that ritual, part of that transition is a hurtful and damaging event. Who in Botswana does not want to be part of a marriage, or in her marriage to have the aunts, and the grandmothers and the mother and everybody dancing around them, giving them final instructions? They want that. Then how can they remove themselves from their own culture and still attain or keep their rights? So often when we think about how to attain rights for little girls in developing countries, I think we have to understand the context within which actually those rights are denied. And also to understand that it is not enough to isolate any event. It is not enough to look at FGM. It's not enough to look at the polygamy in Swaziland. It's not enough to look at maybe Buhadi or bride wealth, I think it's called. It's not enough to look at India and talk about, it's not enough to look at that event. It's important to look at the whole process and to say what it is that is attracting the enactors of these rituals to it. Why are these little girls excited about the ritual if it's so hurtful? And only then, if you can understand that, can we begin to even hope to change things. But these Aishas we're talking about, they're hearing other things as well. They're going to school, and their teachers are whispering about women's rights, girls' rights. They're talking about CIDO, and they're talking about the Convention on the Rights of Children. And so these kids have to juggle these truths. Is it the truth of my grandmother, that I am part of a whole, and that the family is more important than me, that I must live by? Or is it the truth of my teacher who tells me that you're an individual worthy of dignity in your own right? They've got, guidance and counsel teachers telling them the same thing. They're reading in the radio, in newspapers, and television of women who've done great things. And they wonder, which truth is much more valuable? My grandmother has envisions for me a life with a husband, and children only, and perhaps something else. But my teacher with the radio, the television, newspapers are telling me that, Johnson Sirleaf exists. She's the president of Liberia. How do I become a president of Liberia if I cannot I cannot speak in my own home? How can I possibly lead anybody if within the smallest unit in the community, that's the family, I have no right to speak? They get confused. There are NGOs around them, telling them about what is possible, teaching them about their human rights, talking about children's rights, talking about women's rights. How does this feature into the greater scheme of things in their lives? They meet sometimes police officers, kind police officers, who seem to think that a rape is actually a violation of their self and not just a violation of their families. How do they juggle these truths and come to decide this is the way to go and not the other? So, justice for women and girls in the developing countries demand families that nurture and protect. Families that relook at themselves and actually put greater value to the individuals and not just in the institution. And the institution should exist to nurture the people inside, not the other way around. Justice demands footpaths in public spaces that are safe for women. And in the case of the Aisha in Uganda, for example, when that does not happen, when the system fails you, a justice system that is responsive. It demands communities that do not treat women as if they are perishable goods to be contained and saved to avoid spoiling, but women to acknowledge that women are individuals in their own right, with the right to self-autonomy, self-dignity. It demands schools that do not shortchange girls. I think it is a fact that in many, many countries in the developing world, girls and boys are treated differently. The messages given to them are different. The school curriculum, perpetuate this stereotype that women, that boys are more superior than girls. That science is for boys and not for girls, and allows often abuse within school without the school system not doing anything about it. Just for girls and boys and girls, justice for girls in the developing world also demand policymakers who actually believe that development is not just roads, it's not just buildings, it's also the strengthening and nurturing of the individuals. And therefore, policymakers who are willing to demand a greater share of the national cake to fund the kind of programs we're talking about. It demands legislators, who realize that they must have put in place the necessary laws to make sure that the Aisha of Sierra Leone, can still be part of being her community without necessarily being physically hurt. It demands an international community that is responsive, that realizes that we are living in a global world. I'm sure it's been said 1,000 times, almost like a broken record. But also that Africa is not just out there. International community that realizes that the developing communities are actually coming into our doorsteps. And therefore, it is not enough to think it's happening out there. And therefore, to have the courage, in places like Maine, in countries like, to actually confront these issues and not say it is their culture and therefore it is not our business. That if we are in this together, we must have the courage to actually ask the hard questions. It demands community leaders as well, who are willing to ask the right questions. The UN Women report actually gives us some pointers as to how we can attain justice for women in developing countries and, of course, internationally. It says that we must support, or countries must support, women's legal organizations. And I have to say that having worked in this area for many, many years, I cannot overemphasize the importance of supporting those organizations, that are constantly saying something different can be attained here, even in the face of resistance. It must support one-stop shops to make sure that someone like Aisha doesn't have to go to the police station and then a clinic and then this and this and this. One-stop shops to make sure that services can be attained at a one-stop shop. We must implement gender-sensitive legislation. The example of the case of Botswana, when we talked about the case of the citizenship case, which is the case that I don't think we talked about this evening, but in my case, I was asking the question, how is it that my brother can go to Afghanistan, America, India, wherever, come home with a bride, and his children are Botswana citizens? But in my case, the law says that because I'm a woman, my kids cannot be Botswana citizens. And therefore, that was obviously a discriminatory piece of legislation. It took 5 years for me to fight and win. Again, but there are many laws like that around the world. So we need we need legislators who are willing to actually come up with gender sensitive laws. I'm really tired. Quotas. I know that many people say, there are many people who are against quotas. I'm very, very much pro quotas. I think the CEDAW causes temporary special measures. And why do I say that? The rules are made generally by the gamers. And therefore, the rules of how women get into leadership, of leadership are made by those who are already in the game. And until and unless we have enough women in those spaces to begin to change the rules, to make sure that the rules actually are responsive to women, then we're going to continue to ask the question, how is it that after so many years you don't have a female president in the United States, one of the greatest democracies in the world? The reason you don't have it is because the